You're listening to a mini episode of the Practical Permaculture podcast with Joe and Elise. Hey everyone, Joe here today to discuss the permaculture principle of catching and storing energy. So in general, catch and store energy is about harnessing energy when it's available and it's abundant, and it's about using it when it's scarce. So this principle is rooted in the idea that energy in all its forms, whether it be sunlight or water, wind, produce, or even human effort, shouldn't be wasted. So instead, we should essentially find ways to capture this energy when it's readily available and store it for future use. So by doing this, essentially, it not only ensures a steady supply of resources, but it also promotes sustainability by reducing dependence on non-renewable sources, right? So this principle is crucial for creating sustainable systems that can support us in the long term. And by catching and storing energy, we build resilience into our systems and we make them less vulnerable to external extremes like droughts and floods and energy shortages like brownouts or economic disruptions, things like that. So this approach really encourages us to think ahead and plan for future needs, and it promotes a mindset of conservation and of stewardship. So we're really getting the most out of our effort, and we're getting the most out of the land, but we're also giving the most back, right? So it really is working with nature's rhythms and cycles to really create that balanced and sustainable way of living. So let's go through some examples. So, example number one, and I think most of us have heard about these if we haven't already got them on our homes, solar panels. So, it's one of the most common examples. They catch and store sunlight, they convert it into electricity, and depending on your setup, then that can actually be stored in batteries for later use. We've got a ton of solar panels, but we don't have any batteries at the moment. So, that's on our plan and our list of being able to install that, so that it's going to allow us to have that renewable energy source even when the sun isn't shining, and we can then tap into that and we're not dependent on the mains. We'll still be connected to the grid, but we won't be dependent on that. That'll be our backup as opposed to our solar being a backup. Number two is rainwater harvesting, and we have discussed this in previous episodes, but it's a really great example because by installing rain barrels or rain tanks or ponds or dams, so it doesn't have to be in a tank, it can be in the ground. But essentially, we can collect rainwater from any surface, so whether that's a roof or whether that's runoff from, say, a hard surface on the ground, or runoff from, a paddock or something like that. We can then use that water during, dry periods, during drought. And depending on how we've stored it as to how we can use it in the gardens, we can use it, for household use, for washing or for flushing toilets. There's all sorts of different ways that you can use your water. Composting, that's another one. It's a fantastic way to catch and store energy. So by composting kitchen scraps and kitchen waste and really anything that's organically based, so anything that started its life as organic matter, we can create rich, fertile soil, and that's going to nourish the plants, and that improves our gardens, it improves productivity, it improves life in our soil, and that improves the food that we grow, and that improves us. So it is, again, it's a closed loop, it's a holistic system. So compost is a really great way to catch and store energy for something that would otherwise end up in landfill. Greenhouses are a really good way to catch and store energy. So they're excellent for catching and storing solar energy. So essentially they trap heat, they create a warm environment for plants to grow, and they really extend the growing season. And they'd also protect them from extreme weather conditions. So if you've got really heavy frosts or torrential rain periods, or maybe you get some really gnarly winds on your property, then a greenhouse can be a really helpful asset. Now, here's a really cool one. We don't have one, but it's on our list, and that's a biogas digester, if I can say it right. So biogas digesters capture organic waste. So you add food to them, like food scraps, you add manure, and essentially what they do is they convert that into a biogas through an anaerobic digestion process. And then this gas can then be used for cooking or can be used for heating. And the leftover of that, so the byproduct of the actual digester is this rich slurry that's really nutrient rich, nutrient dense, and that makes great fertilizer for the gardens, or you can add it to your compost, or there's a number of different ways that you can use it. So there's no waste product. There's a byproduct of the digester, but you can then use that in the garden. Now, thermal mass, this is something that I think a lot of us probably use, and we may not even consider that that's really a way of catching and storing energy. So using thermal mass, such as you can think about water barrels or stone walls or, decks, like we've got quite a big deck surface, and that actually catches a lot of energy. It actually creates quite a big thermal mass. So that then helps our garden beds, which are along the side of the deck. But basically, it just means any large surface that's going to catch the sun during the day and then releases its energy slowly at night. Like, think about, a big concrete slab. Like if it's been hot during the day and the sun's been beating down, then that slab heats up. Then you go out there at night, you stand on that slab and all that warmth starting to be released. So think about what that does for your plants. So it really gives them a nice stable temperature and extends the growing season. And again, reduces the need for artificial heating if you're in an environment where you may need to do that. Another cool one is a DIY solar oven. I love this. I've not ventured into making them yet, but it is something, again, that's on our list because you can't do everything all at once, right? So it's building a simple solar oven out of, some basic things like cardboard and alfoil and, a bit of glass or some perspex. I think there's lots of different ways that you can do that, but essentially you can create an oven that uses the sun's energy to cook food, and obviously that then saves electricity and gas depending on what your usual method of cooking is. So let me share 4 practical tips. Now, lo and behold, the first practical tip is the one that we always give. And it's the one that I need to, I think I say this because I need to keep reminding myself, start small. You don't need to make massive changes. You don't need to start doing everything all at once, but just make small changes. So it might be starting somewhere, or it might even be upscaling. Most of us are already catching and storing energy in some way, shape, or form. So maybe just take the next logical step. So it could be like, using a rain barrel and then stepping that up to maybe a water tank, or you've got a small compost that you've been wanting to upscale, and maybe put another compost bin in, or maybe start making a hot compost. Just scaling up slowly and in small ways can make a huge difference. So energy efficiency, that's another tip. So think about minimal effort, but you can have maximum output. So improving the energy efficiency of your home. And it could be things like using energy saving light bulbs. It could be installing some sort of window coverings over your windows so that you can keep heat in, during the evenings in winter if you've got the fire going or something like that. Think about how you can insulate your home in really quite cost effective and simple methods. You don't have to go, installing insulation in all the walls, but think about what you can actually do. Can you close certain areas of your home off to really capture the warmth in certain areas and not worry about warming other areas that don't need it? And of course, the obvious one, because it's permaculture and it's all about design. So think about, like, I suppose specifically when we're talking about design, say in the garden, design the garden to catch and store energy naturally and move energy through your garden in a way that allows you to catch and store energy in a much easier way. So don't expect water to flow uphill, things like that. Or there's, even basic things. Use mulch to retain soil mulcher, plant perennial crops, create windbreaks, and create little microclimates where you can protect certain plants that might need those specific climates. And one of my favorite is food preservation. So preserving food through canning and drying or fermenting is another great way to catch and store energy. Like when your garden produces more than you can possibly eat fresh, preserving that surplus is a really great way to really extend your produce. And of course, you're continuing to eat your beautiful, holistically, organically grown food. So I think that's a really good summary of catching and storing energy. look, the approach for us has really significantly reduced our reliance on big corporations, and it really has allowed us to be living more sustainably. And, it improves our health and our lifestyle, and it improves our enjoyment as well. When you see how well that something's performing, when you've designed something in a specific way, it just gives you such a buzz. So, as they say, make hay while the sun shines, because why wouldn't you? Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, then please give us a like, a review, and share with your friends. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We're sure you'll find the right podcast for you.